Well, one of the items you mentioned is security, because while he went on those trips to the AU, the neighbors, the G7, he's very particular about security. He has it very close to his chest. Tell us, the last time out when there was that meeting with the French president, former administration, there were those who had the expectation that Britain had offered to help in terms of intelligence. Many don't understand what went wrong. How do you intend to correct it now?
Nothing's gone wrong. It's just gone slowly. President Hollande of France convened a meeting in Paris. This is a while ago, after the kidnap of the Chibok girls, to attempt to pull together the Friends of Nigeria, the International Friends of Nigeria, and we speak in shorthand the P3, the three permanent members of the Security Council, France, the United States, and the United Kingdom. We followed that up with a meeting in London, and that was then followed up by a meeting in Abuja, operationalizing what we were trying to do, from the concept to the structures to activity. And there is activity. The United Kingdom and the United States in particular are contributing to intelligence gathering and, what's as important, intelligence analysis. I mean, feeds from space don't give you much until you know exactly how to make them work on a grid map in front of you. And the second thing that we've been doing for a while now is working with the Nigerian army, actually training Nigerian soldiers to operate in cohesive units in a combat environment. We want to move from training companies to training battalions. We want to work up to divisional level, which is the senior operating elements in Borno State and in Adamawa. We've made some progress. We need to make a great deal more. But what we need above everything else is access. Let us in. Allow us to talk to the very senior people. Allow us access to the troops. And this is something the Nigerian army must do. Provide us with the tools that are required: weapons, ammunition, communications, uniforms.
Nigerian army should provide,
yes,
the troops?
Well, the troops are there,
okay,
but the troops are not, or have not, been as perhaps well equipped as they might have been. That can be rectified. Nigeria has a military budget of $5 billion a year. That is more than adequate to provide the basic inputs the troops need.
Just a moment here. What kind of troops are we talking about? Combatants or
yes.
people?
No,
competence.
Yes, Nigerian army battalions and brigades who are part of the 3rd Division based in Maiduguri. Competence. What we've found, it's worth saying this because it's, the Nigerian army has had a difficult time of late, and senior officers have often, accused their soldiers of being cowards, and there have been court-martials and so forth. The British regiment that was training 2 companies of Nigerian soldiers very recently, who then went on to do extremely well in Adamawa State and push Boko Haram out of parts of around Mubi. The British regiment that trained them said they preferred working with Nigerian soldiers to working with soldiers they trained in other countries.
Why?
Because they found the Nigerian soldier to be really good material, loyal, hardy, and prepared to to take risks. What he didn't have, we found, was not just some basic equipment, but the training to give him confidence in 2 things. Firstly, that he had a good chance of staying alive, and secondly, that he had a good chance of winning. Now, you give a soldier those 2 things, and you've created a much more effective unit. So that is what we can offer, and it's not a theoretical thing. We're not going to put British soldiers into Borno State. This is a Nigerian conflict. No Nigerian government, not least this one, has ever asked for someone to come and fight their battles. But what we can and will do is train Nigerian soldiers to fight more effectively, and we have seen that they can do it. So our Prime Minister has made this offer to the President. Our Foreign Secretary followed it up very recently. What we're waiting for is the access and whatever arrangements are going to be made about the command at the top of the Nigerian Armed Forces, so that we can move forward.
Quite some sort of news now to note that some of those people who were able to push them out of Mubi were some of those who got trained by the folks from the UK. But you did say it's not been stopped, but rather slow. What's the reason for this slow move in achieving this? Because if we can get some form of results from those who were in Mubi, then I thought by now we should have just be a bit more fast or faster in driving all of those units out there.
Well, we would hope so too. I mean, I think the perhaps, to put it mildly, the ambition on both sides hasn't been equal. We have been very ambitious to try and push this through. But you're dealing with I mean, we're dealing with an army that has its own ways of operation. It's a proud force. There are questions of, you know, structures, personalities, systems that we need to understand. What we don't want to do is push too hard and find that the door closes. But what we think we have at the moment is a new political dispensation, a President of the Republic who himself is a military commander, understands the complexities of what needs to be done, and understands that you can't make it happen immediately, but you can start, and once you start, you can move fairly quickly. So that is all we're asking. The ambition in London, the resources in London exist for ramping up training from companies to battalions. We're ready to start now. What we need is, and I mean, some of it has already begun in Kaduna State, but we just need a bit more access, and the more we get, the faster we can go.
You've been around, and so you're not new to the stories then about trying to get ammunition for the Nigerian troops, and the politicking and the stories about countries not wanting to sell arms and ammunition to the country. Did Nigeria at any point in time approach the UK for arms and ammunition?
No, because we've never done that. I mean, we have given or sold elements of equipment to the Nigerian army in the past, but that's not been the relationship that we've had with the Nigerian armed forces. The kind of equipment that we or the United States have and use at a NATO level is very expensive, very complicated to maintain, and not really what is required by the Nigerian army. The army, the armed forces have recently started to acquire again helicopters from the Eastern Bloc, which the Nigerian Air Force has flown before, can maintain, and which are very hardy and reliable. So they don't require NATO levels of weaponry and sophistication. It's just not necessary. There's plenty of serviceable military equipment on the international markets, which Nigeria has used before. The main question is, get it, acquire it, use that military budget for procurement in the way it should be used, and when you've got it, both helicopters, which I think are the particular requirement in the Northeast, I mean, armored personnel carriers are helpful, but for mobility as well as for strike, helicopters are what you need in that terrain. Once you've got that, we can help, and I'm sure the United States will help as well, but we can help not just to train Nigerian soldiers to make maximum use of this new flexibility, but we can help with putting together an operational plan. I mean, the British Army has fought and suffered in Afghanistan and Iraq and other places of great difficulty. We've been there before, we've done this before, without telling the Nigerian Army what to do. We're ready to sit down next to it and work through an operational plan. And as I say, we would start tomorrow.
If we could just move away from the security aspect, let's look at the economy.
Yeah.
You talked about helping the Nigerian economy to bounce back. Would you be looking at getting British companies to set up manufacturing plants here in country? Would that be one of the things you're looking towards?
I'll come back to that in half a second, but I think that looking at the economy, it's a broad swathe of opportunity and of challenge. The things that we could offer, again, up front, are help and advice on public financial management, on austerity budgeting. We've done a great deal of this in the UK in the last few years. I mean, the present government in its first term put in some very tough spending measures, but broadly speaking, they worked. The British economy is recovering and is now one of the strongest in Europe. So we would help in that kind of way. We would also look, I think, at particular areas of the Nigerian economy where we think we can add value. The growing and increasingly successful financial services sector in Lagos, in health and education, where we have particular expertise and where there's huge demand. In the power sector, the single most important piece, I think, of Nigerian infrastructure, we have consultants that work on privatization models all the time. But getting back to manufacturing, we have already companies here that manufacture, from GlaxoSmithKline through to Diageo, making soft drinks and beverages. These are long-established, British-affiliated manufacturing companies right here. A number of them are keen to expand. What they find are institutional blocks of different kinds, from infrastructure. If you're going to expand your bottling plant, you need power. There isn't any, or not enough. So putting in more generating capacity is a major overhead. But that's an area, addressing the whole power sector is an area we can help with. But simple things like, again, to increase production, you need to import. Bottlenecks on, import provisions, be they customs bottlenecks or other kinds, they exist. So I think the big complex thing about the Nigerian economy, huge potential, plenty of well-qualified people, an enormous market here, but what it needs to do is to modernize its offer to the outside world. If it's looking for investment, no investor is a charity. They're looking to make an honest profit in Nigeria. Nigeria needs to be frank and say, look, this is what we'll offer you in terms of infrastructure, in terms of access, in terms of incentives, and this is not just what we'll offer you, but this is how we will deliver it. It's important, I think, to begin that sort of dialogue with international companies, because the world is so competitive, and I'm not just talking about the Far East, other parts of Africa are competitive. Unless companies see overwhelming reasons to come here and risk money and reputation, they need to know what's on offer. So part of modernizing that shop front, so if you're going to say Nigeria is open for business, in what ways? Tell us how. Preparing that shop front, both in terms of the policies behind it, but in terms of the way it's pitched, again, is something that we're more than willing to talk through. So there's quite a lot we can do on that front.